Hello everybody, my name's Marnie. I'd like to welcome you to Frankston City Libraries for our Frank Talk today with Barbara Hannay. Now before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which Frankston City Libraries operates, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to the elders of any other communities who may be joining us today. Now, best-selling author Barbara Hannay returns to her roots with her latest novel, The Sister's Gift. It's a moving and inspiring novel set on the beautiful magnetic island. It's about choices, consequences, and the redemptive power of love. Now, to date, Barbara has sold more than 12 million copies of her books worldwide, and her novels have been translated into 26 different languages. We're so happy she could join us today for our Frank Talk. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Marnie. It's wonderful to be here and to see you all, and wishing you all the very best from warm North Queensland.
Absolutely. We are a little bit jealous.
Down there. Yeah,
we're a bit jealous of you right now. I'm just saying. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your latest novel, The Sister's Gift, and where that story started for you?
Yes. Well, can you see the cover there? The Sister's Gift, as perhaps the title suggests, is about surrogacy. I have a prologue where Freya gives birth to the baby for her sister, and then the rest of the story takes place 25 years later when that baby is now a young woman, and the sisters' relationship has changed quite a lot since that early first point. And the story actually started for me with wanting to write about a woman in the middle of her life who had hit rock bottom. I had the idea a year before I started writing, and I just knew then that I wanted a woman in the middle of her life who was divorced, who'd lost her job along with her divorce and her home, and had had to start all over again. The idea of surrogacy didn't come straight away. I had thought maybe but then during the year I started to think, oh, maybe she did have a surrogate baby when she was young and she wants to go and find her now. That idea didn't quite work, and eventually I came up with the idea of the daughter, it's her niece, her sister's daughter, reaching out to her when she has the hits rock bottom and making an offer to her, which causes huge worries though for her mum, because Freya and her sister Pearl's relationship has become quite strained over the years because of one decision that Freya made, and that is that on the day that she had the baby, she decided not to share the experience with Pearl. She had promised originally that she would, but then on that day she decided she just wanted to have the baby on her own, that this would be a few moments where she'd get to enjoy this little person that she'd been carrying for 9 months. She didn't realise how much that was going to hurt Pearl. So the story kind of explores the ramifications of all that later.
Wonderful. And as a writer, what made you choose to have Freya make that choice to actually have that experience to herself?
You know, I'm not sure if I actually plotted that or whether it just came in the act of writing, because that does happen a bit for me. I write fairly intuitively. I've asked myself that question because I started writing that scene about the book starts with Freya on the ferry leaving the island to come across to the mainland because her labour has started, and I honestly can't remember. It just some of these things just the characters seem to tell me things. Not always, but in this case they did definitely.
When it does come to writing, do you find that you do plan a lot of your storyline, or are you more a pantser? Are you more following that intuition and seeing where it goes?
Yeah, I like to have a few guidelines. I like to have a definite emotional core to the story, something that I know my characters are going to struggle with, like the surrogacy situation. like in Zoe's Muster, if anyone's read that, where I knew I would have a girl who was going to find her biological father after she realised that the man who raised her was not her biological father. And obviously, because I've got a romance in a lot of my stories, I know that eventually those two people are going to get together. But I don't plot every step along the way. I like to surprise myself, or just explore and find it out along the way. Yeah, I think I'd get bored if I knew absolutely everything that was going to happen.
I've always wondered that about planners. No offense to any planners in the room today.
No.
But I'm also a pantser. And for me, I actually chatted to Carly Lane about it a few months ago. And she literally goes from the last chapter to the third chapter to the 15th chapter to the first chapter. And I said to her, you're the first person I've ever met who writes the same way I do. And people don't understand it. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. Do you find you still follow a sequence of anything?
Oh, yes. No, I'm still very, very sequential. And even when I write dual timelines, you know, a contemporary story and a historical interwoven, I still stop the contemporary and then move into the next bit of the historical and keep going that way. Yeah, it's very sequential. You know, some people like to write the whole of one storyline and the whole of the other and then work out how to interweave them. But no, I do it. I do it. And if I think of something that should have happened back in chapter 2, I go and fix it up straight away. I don't just say, oh yeah, I'll get back to that later. So I'm a little bit nitpicky like that. Yeah, or I don't know what the word is, but yeah.
No, I love it.
The thing is that every writer's got their own process, and it's a matter of I've learned that you just have to trust your own process. You know, what works for you might not work for another writer.
Absolutely. And I feel like the way you're describing your own writing process, that you write for the reader. So it's very much you're writing as though you're reading it at the same time. So it's got to make sense as it goes. Otherwise, you almost can't move to the next without rereading.
Yeah, I think you're right. And yeah, I have always written very much with the reader in mind. I think because I wrote for Mills and Boon first, that I learned a lot about that through that process, because they're very focused on the reader. But I also read somewhere once, I forget which author it was, but she used to imagine her ideal reader as this woman coming home from work at the end of the day, tired, sinking into an armchair and just wanting to relax into a story. And I love that image. So that's kind of what I've kept for me too. While I'm writing, I'm writing for that one person kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you did mention Mills and Boon. Now, you started your publishing career with Mills and Boon. You've now got more than 50 titles to your name, which I just find absolutely amazing. I can't even get one full one out at the moment. But to have more than 50 to your name, what was that experience in that shorter form with Mills and Boon like to start your career?
Well, they weren't nearly as easy to write as I thought they were going to be. I came across them when I was teaching high school year 11 English, and we had to look at romance and detective fiction and action adventure. And I saw these, and we were being very clever and pulling these stories to bits and saying how predictable they were and how stereotyped the characters were. But at the same time, I was thinking, I love these stories. They've got the same little bit of magic that the stories I remembered as a girl, like Anne of Green Gables and Little Women and Rebecca of Sunnybrook, or no, maybe not Rebecca, but anyhow, they all had a romance in them as well. And then someone on my staff sort of said, oh yeah, and you can just send off submissions and they'll look at anybody's work. And I decided I'm going to have a go at this. And over the next Christmas holidays, I sat down and wrote this story and thought it was amazing, and was waiting for their absolute joy to have received this wonderful piece of work. I got a very polite rejection 6 weeks later. But by then I had already written 50,000 words. I was hooked on the whole writing process, and I realised though that I had tried to write one with having read 2 in my entire life. I then had to read lots and lots of these stories and really understand what it was that the readers got out of them, and just really understand the genre. I got, I think, 3 more rejections over the next 3.5, 4 years, but eventually I wrote one that they loved, and I got the magic phone call from London, and yeah, it was very, very exciting. Probably, I shouldn't say the most exciting day of my life, but certainly after, yeah, it was very close to it. And but what I learned, because the Mills and Boon have got such a wide audience, and they want, you know, you hear rumours that you have to have a kiss on page 6 and, you know, all these sorts of things. It's not as structured as that at all. But they do know what their readers want and enjoy. So you often get a lot of quite strict revisions from editors, you know, saying, no, you can't do this and we want that. But it was always about deepening the character and deepening the emotion, really. Yeah. Making the characters believable, all that sort of thing. Also not wasting time on too much background, you know, just getting into the story quickly. So that were some of the things I learned from that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then after, you've been at Mills and Boon for a while, and then you got the call up from Penguin.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, I do say, you know, it was kind of a miracle. It's the sort of thing that doesn't happen very often. But what I should mention is that for everyone who gets good luck, there's usually someone behind it. I did have a very good friend who mentioned my name to an editor at Penguin, and they were on the lookout for more Australian authors. And one of them, wrote to me and asked me if I'd like to write for them. And that was when rural romance was on the rise. And so I wrote Zoe's Muster, the one about the girl looking for her biological father. And that was, I had already written a lot of stories set on cattle properties in North Queensland. That was kind of my niche. So it was exactly what they were looking for. So it was lucky. Yeah.
Perfect. And I will go back a step. Now, growing up, you actually wanted to be a journalist. Is that correct?
Well, I talked to my dad about that. I mean, I suppose we all go through a few different things that we want to. I read To Kill a Mockingbird and wanted to be a lawyer for a little while too, like Atticus Finch. But no, I did want, because English was my best subject at school, and we used to have to write little news stories, you know, as part of our assignments and things like that. But he talked to the men at work and came home and said, no, journalism's not, this is back in the late 1960s, by the way, you know, journalism's not a suitable job for a girl. Journalists spend all their time in pubs. And then a few years later, I met and fell in love and married a journalist. And Dad was actually right, because not quite, but back in those days, that's where the stories were, in the pubs, because the coppers hung out in the pubs. So the journalists did have to go to the pub. And there weren't very many women journalists then either. So different now, of course. Yeah. So yeah, I was an obedient daughter and went off to university and became an English teacher instead.
And ultimately a best-selling author.
Yeah. Which is...
Now, we do talk about the fact that you've authored more than 50 books and sold more than, I can't believe, 12 million copies worldwide. I know you're not meant to have favourite children, but do you? Do you have a
favourite book? I think sometimes what becomes my favourite is partly influenced by other people's reactions to them. But yeah, I think I do, sort of. My favourite, Mills and Boon, was one that was quite unconventional in that it was all written through emails. It was called Molly Cooper's Dream Day. And it was actually set on Magnetic Island too, which is where the sisters is set, and it was about a girl I wrote it during the GFC or just after. So a girl on Magnetic Island ends up swapping houses with a guy in London who was burnt out by the GFC, and he was looking for an estate in London. And they communicate via email. And I just loved being able to do something so different and really enjoyed that story. And it got a lot of great feedback from readers, and won me a Romantic Book of the Year award. So I was very pleased with that one. And I think from the Penguin books, probably this one, The Secret Years, I feel like it might be my kind of standout one. My editor reacted very, very favourably to that when I handed it in. And they put a guaranteed Goodreads sticker on the front, which was very nice of them. And I've had a lot of feedback from readers. It's a contemporary story combined with a historical. And the historical story deals with the Blitz in London, an aristocratic woman who falls in love with an Aussie digger in London. And I also give them an exciting adventure escaping in the PNG jungle from the Japanese. And then the contemporary story is a girl from Townsville, a soldier who comes back from Afghanistan. And she's the granddaughter of that digger. Yeah.
Very cool. Now, one of those books that you mentioned has now been optioned for a film, is that correct?
Well, Molly Cooper was, but with all COVID and everything, I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day.
It'll happen.
I hate to imagine how many movies are out there, lined up wanting to come to the screen. So I don't know. But it was lovely to know that people were even wanting to, yeah.
Absolutely. Congratulations on that. I think it's just one of those things that not everyone gets to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I've at least read the script, what they've done with it, and that was exciting. Yeah.
Oh, it'll be exciting to see the cast when they get to that point as well.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you can't tell us anything if you do know anything. So
no, I don't. No, I don't. I have grave fears for its future, actually. But anyhow, we'll see.
It'll be fine. The fingers are crossed. Now, tell me, The Sister's Gift is set on Magnetic Island, and you said the other book is as well. How do you go about choosing where you set each of your novels?
Well, because I've set nearly all of them in North Queensland for the contemporary story, and that's because I've lived here now since 1971. And we moved to the Atherton Tablelands for about 10 years, so I set a trilogy up there. Why I chose Magnetic Island, I was looking for something a bit different that I hadn't. I wanted to come back down to this region from the Tablelands, but I also like that Magnetic Island still has the feel of a small country town, because it is only a little island. It's only got a little over 2,000 people living there, and it's a series of bays separated by headlands, and each bay has its own little village. So it was a bit of a pressure cooker kind of setting, where if I've got a story that involves tension and families and secrets and gossip, if I put it on a small restricted space like that, something's going to have to give at some point. So that, once I realised that I wanted to set it there, I saw all the advantages of doing that.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it does take a little while to find the right setting. Yeah.
So when you do sit down to write your first draft of a novel, how long do you think it takes for you to get that first draft down?
Well, now that's another interesting thing. I write a really slow first draft. I would love to be one of these people who can just dash off a really rough, quick first draft and then come back and rework it. But I'm the other sort. I'm the slow plodder, fixing up as I go kind of person. So by the time I get to the end, it's usually my deadline when the book's due in. But I've worked over it and over it so much as I've gone along that it's just about ready to send. So, yeah, it takes me about somewhere, it depends, between 4, 5, 6 months, just depending.
Yeah, so it's almost, yeah, by the time you do get to the point of handing it in, even though you've written it essentially once, you're almost mentally up to the third draft.
Oh, easily, yeah. Yeah, I could even more possibly because I'm such a fiddler along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I am interested, do you have anyone in particular you go to have read your manuscript before you send it off to the editor?
In recent years, I haven't done that. Oh, well, I've got my husband. He's as I said, he was a journalist, and he's a writer too. And actually, he's also my main cheer squad and my first reader. Every couple of weeks, I print off what I've been writing and give it to him to have a look at. And he's been with me every step of the way, and cheered me along so much that he kind of knows what I should be doing and what they want from me. So he's a really good sounding board. But I do have a very good friend, a writer, Anne Gracie. She writes Regency novels. She lives in Melbourne. She writes for Berkeley. And I often whip off a chapter or two to her just to see what she thinks as well. But yeah, no, I don't have a street team or anything like that, like some writers do.
It must be really nice having another writer physically so close to you as well, so that when you are asking for that feedback, it's not necessarily feedback you don't need. It's more the actual flow feedback, where you're heading with a plot line. Do you find that really, really valuable, having that so close to you?
Absolutely, yeah. I feel really, really lucky in that regard. Many conversations on verandas where we throw ideas around. And what else I'm really lucky with is that he's very tolerant. If I tell him, something, that his ideas are rubbish, he'll accept that. Yeah.
I love it. Now, we'll point out to our audience here today, we do have the chat function down the bottom of Zoom. So if you would like to ask Barb any questions, please write them in the chat and I'll be able to read them out to her. Tell us, in your career, what would you say, have you had any weird things happen to you in that career? Like anything that stands out for you along that time?
Weird. I've had some wonderful things happen.
Well, let's go with wonderful then. Let's go with wonderful. That's probably a heap easier.
I've had some wonderful experiences in going to conferences overseas. I went to a conference for Romance Writers of America in New York way back in 2003. And Harlequin, our publishers at the time, put on this most amazing black and white ball in the Waldorf Astoria, in the Starlight Room, where Ella Fitzgerald and all those wonderful singers used to perform. And that was like just the most amazing night that I'll never forget. And then walking back to our hotel through the streets of New York with the smoke coming up through the grating in the road. And with a whole lot of other authors, so that was fabulous. And I also got to speak at the Women's Fiction Festival in Matera in Italy quite a few years ago now. And Matera is that place in the south of Italy, in the heel of the boot, where the people used to live in the caves. And the hotel that we stayed in was actually built in, it was one of those caves, but it had been done up and, made lovely. And it's the second oldest city in the world after Damascus. So that was just the most amazing experience. So they're two that I feel very lucky to have had.
Oh, it sounds absolutely divine. And I've just got a question from Norman. We've just got, could you please hold up the title or tell us the title of your favourite book out of your own collection? They just couldn't see the title on the screen.
It's called can you see it now?
We can. The Secret Years.
The Secret Years. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Now tell us, Barb, what do you do with your spare time?
Well, I have been a gardener. when we lived on the Atherton Tablelands, we had 5 acres on the side of a hill, and I spent a lot of time gardening. Now that we're back here, I don't have that much room, but I'm still doing lots of things with pot plants. And this morning we harvested our first cherry tomatoes. Very exciting. Gardening's one. I do a lot of walking. We've got beautiful walks where we live now, all along the Strand in Townsville and around the headlands. And I sing in a cappella choir. Mind you, that's been put on hold this year because singing's not in a group's not a good idea. But I really enjoy that too.
Wonderful. And I am noticing your spider. Is that a spider plant behind you there?
Yes. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, beautiful. Mine does not look like that.
Right. Yeah. I should explain to everyone, I am not in my office today. I'm actually in the bathroom because there's so much noise with a council truck out the front pumping out drains and things that I had to come in somewhere that was really quiet. So, yeah, normally I'd have books and everything all behind me and look a bit more authory.
I was going to say, if I hadn't have asked about the spider plant, we would never have known. So I apologise for that.
No, it's fine. I'm happy. Yeah, and you know how I called it the sister's gift? Well, my sister's just visited me because she was in Alice Springs visiting her daughter who works out there with Indigenous people, and because of the border lockdowns, to get back to southeast Queensland, she had to come home via Julia Creek in Townsville. So I got to visit her, and she bought me this beautiful tea towel in Indigenous art. So,
oh, beautiful. I had actually been admiring that hanging behind you.
Yeah, so that's why that's hanging. Looks better than a bath towel.
Oh, definitely. Now, Michelle's just asked, what was your first Mills and Boons book called again?
Outback Wife and Mother.
Outback Wife and Mother. Wonderful.
At the time I went into the fetal position because I'd called it something really romantic and lovely, but yeah, that's what they called it.
I hear about that. I hear that all the time. Titles just changing and yeah. Now tell me, Rena would like to know, which authors do you like to read? So what's on your reading pile at the moment and who are your go-tos?
I'm actually reading Sandy Docker's Banksia Bay book at the moment. Which
I have that on my reading pile.
Yeah. But I have to confess, I'm trained. Oh, and I'm also reading from my book club, A Gentleman in Moscow, which it's a slow start, but once you get into it, it's absolutely beautiful. So that's a really enjoyable read. I read some self-help type books. So I read a book that I found really interesting earlier in the year called Lost Connections. But I often read that more for my, luckily I don't have too many problems, but that I'm aware of. But for my characters, I sort of sometimes read these because it helps me to think of flaws that can heal for my characters. I read a lot of English authors for some reason, and I love all the Lucy Diamond and Rosamund Pilcher is an all-time favourite of mine. But yeah, I like a wide range of books too, and still I enjoy crime. One of my favourite Christmas stories is In the Bleak Midwinter, which is a crime story set in New York State in America. So
wonderful. Excellent. I always find it fascinating seeing what is on other people's reading piles, and that is certainly an eclectic list. Now tell me, if you could give one piece of advice for an aspiring author, given your career and your experiences, what would that be?
I think it's really important to write the sort of thing that you love to read. And as you can see from what I found for myself, also to read lots of books in that genre so that you really do understand what the editors might be looking for and why this genre works for so many readers. And the other one is don't give up at the first rejection. I know I've had so many friends that I've thought were really talented and promising, but they just can't take rejection. And I just feel so sorry for them, because I was happy to do whatever the editor wanted me to do, to rip my story apart and turn it into that first one, Outback Wife and Mother. I had the heroine was a ballet dancer at the time, because my daughter was heavily into ballet, and it was the world I was living. And she said, "Oh, readers can't relate to ballet dancers, so can you change her careers?" So I became a fashion designer, and apparently that was fine with readers. So, yeah. So, and then interestingly, 10, 15 years later, they were really happy to have ballet dancers. The tastes had changed. So, yeah, I know some people probably wouldn't want their precious work to be interfered with like that, but I was prepared, because I was really keen to get published, that I was prepared to make changes to suit the market.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that I've taken away from doing the job that I do in interviewing authors is that basically the editor's there to help you make your story the best story it can possibly be. That's what they're good at. They can see they're removed from your story. They don't have the same emotional connection that an author does. And I've had many authors say to me, I didn't want to change it. I was just blinkers on. And once I did what they asked me to do, they reread it and went, "That's actually amazing." And understanding, the hooks and the turns and all the sorts of directions that these stories need to go through in order to be a palatable story for somebody. And you're right, to be able to come home from a really hard day at work, or whatever somebody's doing, and just that escapism into your story. So certainly a talent.
Sorry. Another bit of advice that I got picked up many years ago, when Donald Maas, the New York agent, came out to one of the Romance Writers of Australia's conferences. He gave a fabulous one-day workshop, but the take-home message that I've never forgotten from that is tension on every page. And it doesn't have to be like gun fighting, like something in Homeland or something like that kind of tension, but emotional tension. No quiet, just having a cup of tea for the sake of having a cup of tea. If they're having a cup of tea, there's got to be some kind of problem that's going to emerge out of the conversation, or something like that.
Or they're trying to work out that dilemma over the cup of tea.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely. That's fantastic advice. And Barb, what's next for you? What are you currently working on?
I'm working on another story for Penguin that is about the people that inspired by the Lost Connections book, people who are lost in some way, suffered some hurt, and they connect through a garden, actually. So I'm combining an interest with two of my interests. I'm only about a third of the way into it, and so I've got a lot to work out yet, but I'm really enjoying it. So I hope it comes to life and everyone else gets to enjoy it one day.
Absolutely. When's that one due out at this point?
Oh, I presume it'll be this time next year.
I always like to know, like, the little behind the scenes, like when can we expect that one?
That seems to be my slot, so I suspect that's what will happen.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, congratulations on The Sister's Gift. It's an absolutely fantastic read, and on your career to date. It's just been amazing.
Thanks for everyone for coming. It's lovely to see all those names and some faces on the screen there.
No, thank you so much for joining us, Barbara. We
Hi,
really
Michelle.
appreciate it.
I recognise Michelle from Facebook. I'm on Facebook, everybody, if you ever want to connect.
Oh, that was going to be my question. I don't know why. It must have come off the edge of the page, but where can people find you online?
Well, I have a website, barbarahanay.com, just recently updated by my lovely son. And I have, I'm on Facebook. There's Barbara Hannay author page, as well as just Barbara Hannay, but I put most of my book information on the author page. And I am on Twitter and Instagram, but I'm not as regular on those as Facebook. Absolutely
fantastic. Well, everyone, jump on, follow Barbara. Get us some engagement onto those pages. I must say, I was on your blog earlier today. So the new website looks amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
I'll tell Andrew that.
Oh, it looks absolutely fabulous.
Great, thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.
And we hope that you can tour with the next book. Fingers crossed. And we might be able to have you down here.
Yeah, and good luck, everyone down there. We really are all thinking of you going through the lockdown and all the worry that you've got. Yeah. Thank you very much for providing this way of connecting. It's wonderful.
No, thank you so much. Barbara's novels are available right across our online library, which you can access via the Frankston City Library's website. If you're not a member, you can join online and have access straight away. You can also purchase the Sisters Gift and all of Barbara's books through Robertson's Bookshop in Frankston. We will post a link to their online store when we share this video across our social media channels. But otherwise, it's robertsonsbookshop.com.au. Keep an eye on the Frankston City Library's website. We have a heap of great authors and personalities coming up on our Frank Talk series. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Frank Talk with Barbara Hannay for Frankston City Libraries. Thank you so much, Barbara. We've absolutely loved it. Thanks so much.